Christmas has come late, and Arsenal have a genuine transfer link. We're going to talk about that and plenty more in today's Arsenal Transfer Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for tuning in. Very much appreciate it. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Really appreciate your time. And of course, as always, very humbly to see so many of you here in the chat box every single morning. Speaking of which, good morning to Martin and Blackshine and Mira, Runs with Cows, Knowledge, Damien. We've got Franklin, we've got Olawale and Stevie and Carlton, Arasilki, Loga. Zaka Koivu in the chat, Matt G, Temi, Shari, Paul, Jimmy, Stephen, and plenty more of all of you joining us as well. And very much appreciate it. I hope you've had a fantastic couple of days. Christmas Day, Boxing Day. Certainly from an Arsenal perspective, it was a good day yesterday, besides one result, which we'll talk about in just a second. If you could drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. That would also be incredibly appreciated. So please do help us out. Thank you to you all. Right, without further ado, though, let's not waste any more time and jump into today's stories. And we start with a roundup of yesterday's action in the Premier League. Manchester City, the early kickoff, still cannot escape their horrendous form. Man City 1, Everton 1. Brilliant goal from Ndiaye, I believe it was, on the left-hand side. Brilliant volley into the top right-hand corner after Man City thought that they kind of quelled everything. That Bernardo Silva getting on the score sheet and getting the lead that they needed, but still it was not to be. And Everton should have won the game. There was an opportunity right at the end of the match where they had a 4-on-2 situation, and Harrison, I believe it was, wasted that chance. And they really, really, really should have been able to get all 3 points at the end of the day. But still, Man City dropping points cannot be a bad thing. Bournemouth drawing 0-0 with Crystal Palace. Both sides unable to break the deadlock in that game. Newcastle winning 3-0 against Aston Villa. John Duran being sent off for a straight red card. He will not miss the game against Arsenal. There are enough games between now and Aston Villa's visit to the Emirates, so he will be available for that. But it does come as a big blow. Rather controversial standpoint. I don't know what your thoughts are on whether John Duran deserved to be sent off in his collision with Fabian Schär. It seemed that he did make contact. Whether or not it was intentional or not to hurt the Swiss defender is up to interpretation. Southampton losing their first game under Juric and seeing West Ham United, Jared Bowen getting a massive goal there to kind of help their situation. And the other 3 big games of the day, Wolves beating Manchester United in a 2-0 victory to give Vitor Pereira his first win of his time as Wolves manager, and Matheus Cunha scoring directly from a corner. More on him later on in the show. Ruben Amorim and Bruno Fernandes, egg on their faces. Fernandes in particular being sent off for a second yellow card. He only will miss 1 game. He will be back for the game against Liverpool because the first red card he received this season was, of course, rescinded. Liverpool comfortably beat Leicester City, although going 1 goal behind. They never looked like really they were going to lose any points in this one, and in the end it turned out to be pretty comfortable. But still, they still failed to kind of convince entirely, Liverpool, and dropping goals, conceding goals. They've conceded quite a lot in recent weeks, and that has not stopped even when they're playing arguably the second worst side in the table. But arguably the biggest result from an Arsenal perspective was seeing Chelsea lose at home to Fulham. The first time Fulham have won at Stamford Bridge in the West London derby for many, many decades. And it was a very exciting end to that game. Chelsea taking the lead through, of course, Cole Palmer. Brilliant goal from him before we saw a late flourish. Harry Wilson, first of all, with a header at the back post after the 80th minute. And then in injury time, Muniz with a brilliant finish after an excellent counter-attack down the right-hand side. You have to say that Alex Iwobi has been in absolutely fantastic form this season for them as well, and was a big part of the reason why Fulham was so dangerous in this game. I even saw some Arsenal fans suggesting that maybe we should even be looking at Alex Iwobi for a potential return to Arsenal, because he has been just so impressive for Fulham since that move to West London. But Chelsea Them losing this game means that Arsenal can climb above them and Nottingham Forest, who beat Spurs yesterday, to move into third place. But Arsenal can move into second place above both Nottingham Forest and Chelsea with a victory. And you would expect to do so as they play Ipswich later on today. More on that game shortly. And there's another game this afternoon, Brighton and Hove Albion against Brentford. What this means for the Premier League table as it stands is Liverpool are on 42 points after 17 matches. Arsenal are 9 points behind, having played the same number of games. They can close that gap to 6 with a win, but would have played a game more. Chelsea in second place on 35 points. Arsenal would rise to 36 with a win, 1 point ahead of them. Nottingham Forest having an excellent season, sitting in third place on 34 points. Newcastle's extra impressive form as they go into the semi-final in the League Cup against Arsenal. They've won their last 3 games. That moves them up to 5th in the table. And of course, Alexander Isak with a better chance of getting European football for next season. Bournemouth have dropped down to 6th, however, with their draw with Palace, although they remain above Manchester City, who have sat in 7th place. Fulham, though, are on level amount of points, 1 goal worse than Man City in 8th. Aston Villa, several goals worse, 7 goal difference between them and Man City, sitting on -3. Unai Emery not having the best of seasons at all, despite being 1 point behind 5th place. Very tight it is in those 5th to 9th places in the league. Spurs down in 11th place on 23 points, miles off of the top 4 at this moment in time. In fact, there could be 11 points off of 4th place come the end of the day. And Manchester United in 14th place. They sacked Ten Hag in 13th. Ruben Amorim has come in, and now they have gone a worse position off, sitting down in 18th place. Yeah, goodness me, it is very enjoyable indeed being a football fan at the top end of the table right now. Meanwhile, we finally have been able to find a link that looks, to all intent and purposes, rather genuine. Matheus Cunha, according to The Telegraph, according to The Athletic, is of keen interest to Arsenal, and that Arsenal are maintaining a keen look at the Brazilian forward, who, of course, has been excellent for Wolves. When we did our show the other week with Drew and Nick Callow, Drew, of course, did suggest Matheus Cunha as a potential option for Arsenal to sign. He's been very impressive indeed. I was having a couple of conversations with people who aren't Arsenal fans, and unprovoked said that they felt that Matheus Cunha had been the best player outside of the traditional top 6 so far this season. And once again, he was very good in the match against Man United. Now, the issue is with Matheus Cunha is that he doesn't necessarily fall into kind of the category of forward that Arsenal would necessarily need right now. I mean, Arsenal are looking at kind of versatile forward players that can play in those kind of wide areas that could cover potentially Bukayo Saka. Matheus Cunha is kind of more of a central figure or an attacking midfielder. That's kind of his bread and butter. It's more central play. He can play in wide areas, but rarely does so. He's got 10 goals and 4 assists, playing as kind of a second striker option. He played yesterday kind of behind Strand Larsen, playing sort of off the left, if you will. So while he can play in those wide areas and has done, he is more of kind of a second striker. He could offer Arsenal something of a depth to Odegaard during this window, and of course maybe even depth to Kai Havertz. And he offers you, I mean, for those that have been pining for a centre forward, he also occupies that space. But in terms of like covering off Bukayo Saka's injury, he's not a right-sided player. If he was to play in a wide area, it would probably be off the left-hand side. But the positioning, the profile is different. But the problem is that Arsenal have during this window is that there just aren't too many, realistic wide options. We've talked about Ademola Lookman, who would be incredibly expensive as well. We've talked about players that like Nico Williams, of course, who just simply is not going to make his way to Arsenal during January. Jamie Gittins, of course, very difficult to see Borussia Dortmund parting ways with that amount of money that would see him join Arsenal. He too is a left-sided player as well. Brian Mbeumo, who I like a lot, would Brentford sell? Would Bournemouth sell Antoine Semenyo? And you have to ask the question as well, would Wolves sell Matheus Cunha? Well, that's the resolve that Arsenal would need to test. And this is not suggesting that this is kind of a move that Arsenal will even make in January. It may be that Wolves ask for too high of a price for Matheus Cunha, and instead that they might indeed say that if you want him, you're going to have to pay big, big money to get hold of him. in this winter window as well. So, but Arsenal do have a credible link. We do have a credible link to a player that we can look to as something more tangible, which is, of course, a very good thing indeed. Now, moving more back to Arsenal on the pitch, and Arsenal did train ahead of the game against Ipswich. However, no Zinchenko was spotted in any of the images from training unless my eagle eyes had been fooling me. William Saliba was spotted, but only doing inside training. Wasn't spotted doing any outside training, but of course that doesn't mean that he didn't take part in kind of the outside activities. But other than that, everybody else that you would expect to see, we did see. So that obviously is a positive thing. It looks like the likes of Declan Rice fully fit, back available. Calafiori involved as well, back and available. Really, really positive indeed. We're going to go to part 2 now, which is going to be a preview of the game against Ipswich right after this. Right then, let's look ahead to the game against Ipswich, shall we? Well, Arsenal, of course, have got a really important game today as they try and claim 3 points to move into second place and close that gap to Liverpool to just 6, having played, of course, a game more, if indeed they do so. And they have the news, of course, that Bukayo Saka, according to our good friend of the channel, Handa Virgil, has not suffered a full tear of his hamstring and will not have to undergo surgery. Means that hopefully it is not a case of 3 to 4 plus months, and instead hopefully will be that 2 month around that kind of period that he'll be missing for as he goes through this period of absence. But Arsenal need to find a way of replacing Bukayo Saka. And for me, I would like, in the opportunity that I think the game against Ipswich today presents itself, I would like to see Ethan Nwaneri given that opportunity to replace Bukayo Saka today. We have other options, of course. You could move Martinelli to the right. You could put Trossard there for at left side of there. You could move Jesus into that position and play Havertz as centre forward and play Partey and Rice in the midfield, or Rice and Merino, or Partey and Merino in midfield. However, I've gone for Nwaneri, Jesus and Martinelli as my front three for the game today. Kai Havertz, Odegaard and Rice make up the midfield three. I think Havertz and Odegaard have impressed in the last game that we saw them at Crystal Palace, and I'm kind of liking the continuation of this midfield setup. And Rice, I think, offers us plenty more athleticism and mobility than Partey does. If you're going to play with that kind of attacking midfield too, I think you have to use Rice for me as that kind of DM. I think Partey is just a little bit too slow off the ball in terms of playing behind and attacking two that give you less coverage. The back four, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Miles Lewis, Skelly stays the same. I would be easing Calafiori back in and probably starting him in the game against Brentford away from home on New Year's Day as well. But the other options are there. We've got other options to potentially use. As I said, Trossard is there, Merino is there, Calafiori is there, Partey is there. We absolutely have got plenty of opportunities and options as well for this game. And with it being a home match against Ipswich, we are expected to dominate. And so we would be hoping to get a good result. Ipswich are no mugs, by the way, even though there is an expectation to win this game. They have caused teams plenty of problems this season, and we should not underestimate them. But certainly I think it is a good opportunity to use Ethan Nwaneri in this game from the start, if indeed that is what Arteta would like to see. So Let's see what happens. I have a feeling, though, if I'm trying to get into Arteta's head, I feel like it might be Martinelli, Jesus, Trossard, not Nwaneri. But I guess we will indeed have to wait and see what happens. Let's get some predictions from you guys in the chat box. Let me know some of your thoughts. Let me know some of your score lines. I would love to know what you're thinking. From a personal perspective, I think we need a really solid win here. I'd love to see a big score line, like a 3 or a 4 or even a 5-0, of course, but we can't take too much for granted. So I'm going to go for a 3-0 victory. Havertz, Nwaneri and Jesus getting on the score sheet. That is what I'd love to see today. Temi says 5-0 Ipswich with a Delap hat-trick. I think that's reverse psychology there from Temi. Davey says 5-0 to us. Havertz, Trossard, Martinelli, and 2 from Big Gabby. Odegaard assisting all 5. Rob says 4-1 to the Arsenal. Keith says 5-0 to the Arsenal. Z says 2-0. Full time for me. Tom says 3-0. Bakary Lasagna says 3-0. Mohammed says 4-0 to the Arsenal. Paul Keats says 3-0. Shabihi, says 3-0 to the Arsenal as well. Conde also going for a 3-0 Arsenal victory here. I'm seeing quite a few people saying that they would drop Havertz. I really think that people have, for some reason, the Havertz never, ever, ever, ever will be kind of warmed to for some people. It's strange. He's our top scorer this season, is Kai Havertz. And of course, playing in that midfield position, was the only player that made the gamble to score that third goal for Arsenal after Jesus' header hit the post. I really don't quite understand why people still have these reservations about Havertz, considering how many goals he continues to score for us. Jackson says, as long as it's a clean sheet, I don't care. Kelvin says 3-0. Barry says 2-0. Nick says 5-0. More than a wheelchair says 2-0. NSW says 1-1. Joey says 5-0. Gabriel, and Winery. Darren says 2-1 to the Arsenal. Steve says 6-0. And Ev Ginny says 5-0 to the Arsenal. Watermelon says Havertz did well in the last game, and he did well defensively as well. I know some people just have a bit of an agenda, I think, against Havertz, and that's just never going to change. Anyway, let's go to part 3 and your questions right after this. Okay, this is part 3 of the show, where, of course, we jump into the chat box and tackle some of your questions. So if you indeed have got any that you would like to see discussed, now is the time to do so. Jump them in with a little capital Q, and it does help them stand out. Rob says, Ange, Amorim, Rude, and Pep to be sacked by 2025, or who do you think gets sacked first? P.S. Respect to Forest and Bournemouth. They've got a hell of a good manager. Like us, of course. Forest's Nuno Espirito Santo doing very, very well indeed this season. And of course, also Iraola doing really, really good things with Bournemouth. Another Basque manager like Mikel Arteta doing well in the Premier League. Who would have thought it, eh? But in terms of those managers, I think Ange Postecoglou is probably the most likely to be sacked at this stage. I think that's the most likely scenario. So let's wait and see. Conda says, Tom, will we try and use Marquinhos because of Saka's injury? No, it seems like he's already going to be leaving. It looks like he's going to be leaving for Brazil once again and joining Cruzeiro. Looks to be the team that he'll be joining between now and the end of between now and a few days. It sounds like. It doesn't sound like it's going to be too long at all before he makes this move. Evgeny says, Tom, do you think the United's 14th place position is a noble way of paying tribute to Thierry Henry's legacy? I certainly hope so. Jimmy says, our rivals dropped points, and because we don't want to feel left out, we will drop points now. Jimmy's our regular resident pessimist, of course, as always. Also, shouldn't we be looking at players that aren't Champions League cup tied and go therefore for all the trophies? I believe players that have played in the Champions League cannot be cup tied. It's only players that are in the League Cup and the FA Cup, of course. I think a player that's played in the Champions League can indeed play for a new club. I'm pretty sure they can, unless that rule has changed. I thought that if you signed a player from another Champions League club, they can indeed still play. But I could be wrong. But I thought that they could. But I might be wrong. Raul says, Tom, should Arsenal sign a floor raiser in January or a ceiling raiser and a wide forward in January? It depends on who's available. I don't think, Raul, we could even be that picky. If Arsenal can sign a player that improves the squad, they absolutely should go and do that. That is what we absolutely have to try and do. Oso says, Tom, who do you think that we're most likely to sign? Because we obviously have to sign someone. Impossible to know, Oso, at this stage. It really is. I don't have a clue who it is we are most likely to sign because it has been so quiet. This link to Matheus Cunha doesn't necessarily change that. All it does is tell us, of course, that information, that interest in him is of course, real, but it doesn't mean that Arsenal will move for him in January. It may be that they move for him instead in the summer. Chris says, Cunha has been impressive, but it seems like a bit of a wanderer or a wild card, which doesn't feel like a disciplined Arteta player. Could be a great option in multiple positions if the price is right. Of course, he is still awaiting a potential ban, Matheus Cunha, for the actions that he was involved in after Wolves' recent game. Let me just check Cunha. So I'm pretty sure that he could be facing a ban. He's definitely been charged as well. Is Cunha banned? No, not that one. Yes, here we go. So he's charged with misconduct. So Matheus Cunha was charged with misconduct following Wolves' 2-1 defeat by Ipswich on Saturday. The Brazil striker who scored Wolves' equalising on you allegedly acted in an improper manner during a confrontation between the two sides. Post-match footage appeared to show Cunha elbowing a member of Ipswich's security team in the back of the head before snatching the glasses of the man's face. So, yes, it's he could be facing a ban, which obviously would change things as well. Peter says, why are we not looking at a decent striker like a Victor Boniface? Wouldn't break the bank and we could get our main forward in the summer. Again, it's like this January window is not expected to be a window where Arsenal spend loads of money. Victor Boniface this season, 6 goals in 10 games so far for Bayer Leverkusen. He's also currently injured at the moment as well. He's got a hamstring injury, which has seen him miss all games all the way back through to November. So Victor Boniface is not available for selection. So I'm not sure that would be the right way to go at all at the moment, Peter. James says, do we now need to reassess the Everton and Fulham results for Arsenal? Not really, James. They're games that Arsenal should have won. And because of poor finishing, we didn't. Yes, it looks like they've taken points off our rivals, but we don't need to reassess those games. We should have won those games. We didn't win those games, and we didn't take our chances. We were the better team in both games. We didn't win them. They defended really well, sure, and they've had some really good results against other teams this season, but we don't need to reassess them. We were assessing them correctly when we played them. We deserved to win. We should have won. We weren't clinical enough. It really is as simple as that. Amorim really is an incredible manager, says Damien. He's managed to take Eric Ten Hag and make him look world-class. OJ says, Tom, here from South Africa, East London, how can you be from South Africa, East London? Is there a part of East London I'm unaware of? Is there like a little wormhole that you jump into and suddenly you're in Johannesburg? I assume that you are South African living in East London, though, OJ. I'm only messing with you. Just wanted to big you up for the great work for us South Africans to enjoy your content as well. You're very welcome, OJ. Unless there is a part of South Africa called East London. Maybe you'll have to let me know. You'll have to let me know indeed. Harish says, Arteta said he is thinking of different solutions in the absence of Saka. What do you think this could be? My guess is a 3-4-3 diamond. Ethan starts at right wing, moves to the left of the diamond, and Timber proving width with overlapping fullbacks in wing-back positions. Wow, that would be a turn up for the books, Harish. I sincerely look forward to seeing how indeed he intends to kind of do that. But let's wait and see. Connor says, what can you say about Haaland since he has said stay humble? Well, I did an article on this yesterday, in fact, and if you were following me on Twitter yesterday, you would have seen the tweet and the article that I put out. Before he told Mikel Arteta to stay humble, he had scored 10 goals in 6 games with 28 shots with a 35.7% shot conversion. Since Erling Haaland has told Mikel Arteta to stay humble, he has scored 8 goals in 17 games, taken 70 shots with a shot conversion of just 11.4%. His shot conversion is worse than 33% of what it was prior to that. He is hilariously bottling the league at the moment. Alex says, any news on TGT merch or hats for 2025? Maybe. It's a big undertaking to do merch, and we've done it before, but so far, not at the moment. But I will tell you, Alex, if that changes. Maya says, are there any left-footed players who can cover Saka, which are not from the English Premier League? I mean, left-footed players on the right, not from the Premier League. I mean, I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not sure of the level that would be required to come into the team, because of course you've got players like Lookman, you've got players like Gittins, but these are not players that are left-footed for starters. They are right-footed players that would typically play off the left, but left-footed players playing off of the left. I mean, in the Yamal, Sane says Emeka, so does Olawale. I don't think Sane is a realistic January signing. I can't see that realistically being one that there is. Chris says there's a city in South Africa called East London. Is that true? East London, South Africa. Yeah, there is a city in East London called in South Africa called East London. There you go. You learn something new every day. What a surprising turn of events. There you go. East London, South Africa. We got listeners all over the world. Brilliant stuff. Lloyd says Spurs and Chelsea lose and it's worth the celebration even if we haven't played. Oh, you have to enjoy these things. Don't you hate those people that turn around to you and say, why are you celebrating for? You've not played yet. You might lose tomorrow. Don't say anything until Arsenal play. And I'm like, no. This is what being a football fan is about. Enjoying your rivals losing games. That's part and parcel of being a football fan. Stop sucking the joy out of what is football. You know, I want to enjoy my rivals losing games. I want to enjoy Man United losing. I want to enjoy Spurs losing. I want to enjoy Chelsea losing before we've played. If we go and don't win today, We don't win today, whatever. But at least I would have enjoyed the moment prior to that. I couldn't care less about looking silly afterwards. I really couldn't. I'd just rather enjoy the moment right now and, rub it into my mates who support those teams. I'd love to enjoy them. I really don't get those people like, no, let's wait till we've played. No, enjoy it now. Don't let people tell you how you need to enjoy football. Loyanda says East London was a British colonial city in South Africa. Thank you for the kind donation, mate, and thank you for the education. Cooper says Arteta could not go wrong if he tries to get a Cunha or a Semenyo in the upcoming window. They are tried and Premier League proven players. Gavin says, Honeyman, we're not even halfway left. I mean, I assume this is in response to somebody else. Honey May says Liverpool is winning the league this season. No need for Arsenal to panic buy. Keep the funds and spend them in the summer. There is a lot of football still to go this season. There's also a lot of other competitions that Arsenal are still in. It's not just about the Premier League that we can benefit from by bringing in players. Arsenal are looking likely to finish in the top 8 of the Champions League phase, taking them through to the last 16. We're in the semi-finals of the League Cup. And of course, we have still got the FA Cup to come as well. So I don't agree with Honey May here. I think personally we should be looking at to do absolutely our best to bring in a player to add quality to the team. I don't say that we should panic. I don't think it's about panic buying. But I think if there are players in the market like a Semenyo, like an Mbeumo, like a Gittins, like a Lookman, like a Cunha that would add quality to the team, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth moving for during this window. Jahayo says we must sign a striker. Don't get another wing. I mean, I'm sorry, Jahayo, but the strikers that you want are just not going to be available in this January transfer window. So I'm afraid I think you're going to end up being disappointed in that regard. Boss says Liverpool will slip up. Every big six has, but then, so don't worry, they will slip up. I just don't know when they will. James says, I just want a trophy. I don't care which one. Maya says, there's always a Champions League and there's a long way to go still in the Premier League. Rob says, is it questionable to buy a replacement for Saka for 2 months who's going to want to come in and not play when he's back? What I think though, Rob, is the difference is that we have a chance here. Whereas before, where Saka was fit and always fit, it's very difficult to convince a player on the right-hand side who is a left footer, who is a competitive option to come in. What we've got here is an opportunity. We've got a period of games where Saka is out. We've got a period where we can guarantee assigning minutes, and that is not something we've been able to guarantee them before. We can guarantee the minutes here, the chance to come in and compete, and then, of course, the chance to also play in other positions when Saka returns. So I think that if you've ever got an opportunity to convince a left-footed, right-winger, competitive option, I think now is the opportunity. I really do. Ian says, wow, people are already seeing Liverpool winning the league, which is disappointing. There are 3 other trophies, and we have to get to the final of at least one of them. Wong Tom Soup says, I think of this differently. If we can't improve right with the players available, then we can improve the left. Lookman is an upgrade on Martinelli. No, this would also make us much more unpredictable. Ryan says, what's the current situation with Ben White? Are there any updates? No updates specifically. He did have a surgery, of course, which means he was always going to be out for quite a long period of time. There's hope that, of course, he will return in the next couple of months, but there's not a specific timeline at this moment in time for Ben White. But he had to undergo a knee process, like a knee procedure. So that's always going to, take a lot of time to recover from. But he should be back before the end of the season, but I don't know how long before the end of the season, unfortunately. Dennis says, even if Saka becomes back fit, he will still need a good backup to cover him, and there's no guarantee. And I also think, obviously, we've played him a lot of minutes. This is the chance that we have got to go into the market and get a player, I think, in this window that can give us competition to that position. More Than a Wheelchair says we should buy better than what we have, not just cover. Nico Williams and Liao are better than Liao's always a funny suggestion to me. If you've watched our show that we did with Drew and Nick Callow, Drew explains perfectly why Rafa Liao is not necessarily going to be the best option for Arsenal. I mean, this season he has less league goals than Martinelli for AC Milan. He's only scored 3 league goals this season. Martinelli has 4. It's not like Liao is a guaranteed better option than Martinelli, because he just isn't. Not at this moment in time, at least anyway. He's now 25 years of age as well. He's going to cost you a huge amount of money. Rafa Liao is not the guaranteed player. He's also incredibly inconsistent as a player. is a bit of a FIFA player's dream, I think. And I think Leao is just not the player that Arsenal should go for. Nico Williams, as well, has not had the best of seasons either. I don't think it's a guarantee that he's going to come in and take Arsenal by storm. I think Arsenal need to look at who have been consistently performing. Dennis says, I still don't get why people cry out for Leao and then turn their noses up at someone like Rashford. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you could argue that the inconsistency that Leao shows is very similar to the inconsistency that Rashford has shown to a degree. The difference is obviously that Rashford has had a lot of off-field issues that Leao hasn't had. Lloyd says, same player, new manager and tactics, but we've all seen Liverpool fall to off the top many times in the last 7 years. We'll see if it happens this year, won't we? James says, I really hope Waneri gets plenty of minutes on the right while Saka is out. He's the perfect template for his development. Ian says, what about Brahim Diaz or Takefusa Kubo? Diaz is an interesting one because, of course, while playing with Real Madrid, he's usually seen as kind of the backup option for a lot of their forward players. He's limited in the number of minutes that he can play. He's got 2 goals and 2 assists, but he's only played 582 minutes of football so far this season. If we get a better look looking at his kind of his FBref stats and having a look at kind of his profile, he ranks very well. Pass completion 95th percentile, assists 87th percentile, shot creating actions 73rd, non-penalty goals 74th, successful take-ons 91, tackles 93. So he ranks highly in those. I don't think Brahim Diaz is a terrible suggestion at all. Kubo, on the other hand, can't say I necessarily am entirely convinced by Takefusa Kubo. I just don't think the output has ever been strong enough from Takefusa Kubo to suggest that he is the right player for Arsenal to go for. Mad Rambo says AC Milan fans would gladly take someone over Leao right now. Gary says no to Leao as well. Malesi says prudence, clamour for left wingers and strikers, push Jesus to the right wing other than waste the whole window chasing a Saka replacement and get benched 2 months later as we regret a lack of a striker. I mean, but who though, Malesi, is my question. Which striker are you signing realistically in this window? Because I don't see the striker, because I think that you are compromising on signing a potentially brilliant striker in the summer because there's a desperation to sign one now when we don't have to sign a striker now. Because Šeško's not available in January. Gyökeres isn't available in January. Isak's not available in January. None of these players like that Arsenal being linked to are being looked at as January signings. Even Vlahovic, Vlahovic I know is mentioned by a few people as well, but I don't see that even happening in the summer, let alone in January. The strikers that Arsenal need to go for need to be the top tier, like the absolute top tier of those positions. And if you're not in that position, then why compromise? Why compromise on what you need to go for? For me, we have to go and should only be going for the absolute top tier of things. Because if you're not, what's the point? What is the point? Ramba says, hello, Tom. What's your opinion replacing Arteta if he does not win anything this season? It depends where you finish. Like, I cannot see a reality where we finish in a position where you're going to be like, oh, yeah, sacking Arteta makes absolute sense. I just don't think there's going to be a position realistically that Arsenal finish in this year where you could have a realistic argument to suggest that Arteta should be gone. Christopher says, what about Osimhen, currently on loan at Galatasaray? I think there's a reason why he's on loan at Galatasaray. I think there's a reason why you saw no elite level clubs come in for him, and it was Galatasaray and the Saudi League that were trying to poach him at the end of the last summer window. I'm not convinced that Osimhen is the guy. If he was ever to sign for Arsenal, I would sincerely pray that he proves me wrong. I've just never been convinced that Osimhen is the guy for Arsenal. Kieran says, watched Bournemouth against Palace yesterday. Is there really a better available winger in January? Every time I watch him, I'm assuming you're talking about Semenyo, Kieran. I could be wrong, but I'm assuming that you're talking about Semenyo. Harish says, what about Matthias Tell? He can play across the front three, including as a centre forward. Of course, the young Bayern Munich forwards, he's not necessarily getting loads of minutes for Bayern. In fact, he's only played 200 league minutes this season, and he hasn't scored a single goal in any competition in the 351, but he's only played 351 minutes. On loan until the end of the season, maybe. By the way, it's worth pointing out those loan things. We talked a bit about that yesterday. To clarify all of that, the 2 loan cap is, of course, on Premier League players. You can indeed sign, and Arsenal can sign another player on loan as long as it's not from another Premier League club. And we actually looked through it. I made a mistake. I hold my hands up at yesterday's show. I told you that no Premier League club had signed more than 2 players on loan. I completely somehow managed to miss that Everton have got 3 right now. 2, of course, from abroad with Orel Magana and Jesper Lindstrom, and of course Armando Broja as well from Chelsea. So just to clear that mistake up from yesterday. Jahayo says, what about Danny Olmo? Is he available? He may be, but I still can't see Barca having to deal with that situation. I just think that I'm sure that they will find a way to keep Danny Olmo, as they always tend to be able to do. Dennis says, also, what the hell is going on with the sporting director search? January is literally approaching. Dennis, I should make this very clear. There was never any kind of feeling that January was being kind of targeted as when Arsenal would sort out the Edu situation. It was never going to be rushed. Arsenal want to make the right choice. I think it's something they'll look at to complete before the summer. If it's not done by the summer, that's a travesty. But there was never any rush in this decision. It was something that Arsenal were going to take their time over. They, of course, have got somebody in the position right now in Jason Ato, who was Edu's kind of right-hand man. He's currently in there. I've personally met Jason Ato now. I think that I know that he is very highly rated across clubs across Europe, and was very highly regarded by the club and by Edu for his work with Edu. So it's not like nobody is there, that nobody is doing anything that we need to do, but there is going to be no rush on things at all regarding the sporting director role. Of course, we've heard a few names. Roberto Alabe seems to be the biggest kind of name at the moment that's been mentioned, but it's not a guarantee that happens. There's also potential that Jason Ato gets the position on a full-time basis. So that is also something else that could happen. The Dapper Moses, in my opinion, Martinelli plays better on the right, simply because the left-hand side is better. So whoever plays on the right will naturally be around better names, and that will boost their performances. Knowledge says, if we finish second in the league, the semi of the Champions League and the FA Cup, and lose the League Cup final, I wouldn't sack Arteta. As I said before, I just don't think there is I don't see a scenario this season where we finish in the 4 competitions anywhere other than like an argument where you could not justify sacking. I don't get it. I really don't get it. There's desperation for some fans. I think if you look at what's happened to Man United, they've brought in one of the most highly regarded young managers on the continent in Amorim. They've gone backwards already. Now, I do think that he needs to be given time, and the squad is a massive, massive problem. And of course, like Arteta, Arsenal went backwards initially. Remember, we kind of headed backwards from when Arteta first took over, and sometimes you have to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. And that's certainly what Arsenal did. So I'm not exactly like thinking that that's going to fail immediately. It may fail. But then you look at other young managers like Enzo Maresca. Although I did see a really interesting stat yesterday. I don't know if you saw this. I did retweet it. That Chelsea, in their first 18 games of this season, with Enzo Maresca in charge, have accumulated the same number of points as Maurizio Pochettino achieved in his last 18 games as manager of Chelsea. And I thought that was a really, really interesting scenario. I really, really did. I really thought it was interesting to point out that Chelsea under Maresca have picked up the same number of points as what kind of Maurizio Pochettino have in the last 18 games of his Chelsea career in Maresca. So you could argue Maresca has not changed anything. There is an argument there that he has not improved the points tally. Now, we have to see, of course, how he gets on continuing off this. But Pochettino's last 18 games have matched Enzo Maresca's first 18 games. And, of course, the players are more gelled. They've improved. They've developed more since that point. So I think that is also interesting. Oki says Man United have won more trophies than us. I wouldn't swap it. If you're telling me you'd swap their last 5 years with these 5 years of Arsenal, feel free to. Is that what you're saying, Oki? Would you have rather have their last 5 years and be in the position they are in now than the 5 years that we've had and be in the position that we are in now? Because I'm assuming that you would rather, because otherwise, why would you bring that up? If you'd rather have an extra League Cup but be sitting in 14th place right now, feel free, take it. I've got no issue with that at all. I've got no issue with that whatsoever. If you'd rather be where they are and have swapped the last 5 years, if you'd rather have been a Man United fan for the last 5 years than an Arsenal fan and have had what they've had, feel free to tell me. But I wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't be able to justify doing that. Certainly not. Chris says, is the January window going to be much less of an opportunity now with the Champions League? First stage not finishing until the end of the month. Clubs will potentially not want to sell, potentially due to this. Maybe those clubs in the Champions League, of course, that are still fighting their way through. Oki says, no, I wouldn't swap, but context is key. They are sacking managers in hopes to push further than where they are. I think, Oki, you've actually been able to support my point of view. They're sacking managers. They've picked up one extra trophy, and they're worse off. So the context is that they're sacking managers in the hopes to push further than where they were. But they're sacking managers, and as a result, they're actually worse off right now. They changed their manager to Ten Hag within those 5 years and had the worst Premier League finish of their entire club history. They've sacked the Ten Hag. They've brought in Ruben Amorim. And right now, where they are in the league, could even see a record low achieved again. So you're right. Context is key. But that context is not particularly great and certainly supports more so the argument that you should give that time to Mikel Arteta and to appreciate the work that he's done to not only take things forward every single season and to get a better points tally, a better goal tally, get closer to the top every season we've had him so far. And we'll have to see if indeed that 2-point difference, of course, changes this time around. Oki says, I'm not disagreeing, Tom. I'm just saying that their logic isn't 100% wrong. Well, it is 100% wrong right now, is it not? Isn't their logic 100% wrong right now? Because by sacking their coaches over and over again, they're in worse positions than they were before. So is it not 100% wrong right now? Because I don't see how any of it is right. That's for sure. Dennis says they're 2 points off relegation and they're now in December. Joey says United are sacking managers because they are outside of the top 6. They need to push for even a Europa League place right now. Ken says, I watched A Violent Night yesterday. Felt good, gory, violent Christmas comedy. Recommend. Thanks, Ken. Dennis said, we've already done that one. Good question regarding what Elliot's asked. Where's the question? Elliot says, hey, Tom, rank these January targets in terms of best to worst. Semenyo, Lookman, Kudus, Cunha, Gittins, and Rashford. So I think the best option is Lookman of those 6. I think he's the best player of those 6. I think he's the most in form of those 6. I think he's the best value for money of those 6. Next up would be, I think next would be Kudus. Then Gittins, then Semenyo, then Cunha, then Rashford. Now, I want to suggest that even though I'm putting Cunha 5th there, it's only because of his profile. Like, his profile doesn't really fit. Like, he's not a winger. He's not really a centre forward. He doesn't really fit. Cunha would be kind of like just a utility player. If it was the summer window, I don't think we'd sign Cunha. But I think we would sign Semenyo, Lookman, Kudus, or Gittins. I think any of those 4 could potentially be seen as summer signings for Arsenal. I don't see Cunha as a sensible summer signing. I see him as a winter signing. But that's not to downgrade him as a player. I still rate him. I just think profile-wise, I'm not sure it fits. Rashford is 6th just because I can't justify the money and the scenario and the project. I just can't justify it personally. Let's go to Rob, who says, every time we hear and read about Arteta outers, we just point to Man United. Change for the sake of change does not give an auto better and costs loads of money, both in sacking fees and, of course, in new players. Melissa says, there is a possibility that we aren't able to sign anyone in January due to financial reasons. I mean, that's not true. It's not because of financial reasons if we don't sign anybody. Arsenal can sign somebody in January. They may not be able to sign like a ridiculous player, but they can't go out and just sign anyone. So that I think is the misconception. Anyway, let's round things off there. Of course, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. Do drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss you. I'll be at the Emirates a little bit later. And of course, if you're unable to watch the game but you want to keep up to date with what's going on, you can follow the Football.London live blog, which I'll be running later on from the Emirates this afternoon and this evening. Have a fantastic day. Enjoy your Friday. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. Let us know any of your thoughts on today's comments and thoughts and questions in the comment section down below. And as always, up the Arsenal.